in this podcast, Frank shares a story about waiting for a grocery delivery that kept getting delayed. So now anyone who's listening or watching this again can picture this scenario. Maybe not a grocery delivery, but let's say being left waiting, that you're left waiting for something. So in this, he frames it as an example of, in his own words, this is a story about what a grandiose prick I can be. So already my sort of narcissistic antenna are going up because I hear the word grandiose, but I'm patient and I want to listen to this story. So he structured the whole evening around the timing of the delivery, and it kept getting pushed back. And his frustration was mounting, and he was pacing back and forth, stewing and thinking. Again, I'm quoting, I screwed up. I could have made dinner, or I could have ran some errands. What an idiot, unquote. So that's Frank speaking to himself as he's pacing back and forth. So then the delivery finally arrives, and the woman shows up at his door, sweating, apologetic, and explaining that some of the eggs have broken, right? And it was at that moment for Frank, something shifts, right? And he says, and I'm quoting, "My God," that's what he thought. "You asshole. How could you have almost torn into this person?" So instead, he told her not to worry about the eggs. "I hate eggs anyway," he said. And then he asked her if she wanted a drink. So later, reflecting on it, he said, "How did I get so lucky in this moment? If I could reproduce that, I wouldn't be the piece of shit person I am." So what he means by lucky, just to be very clear, is that he didn't tear into the delivery woman once she arrived. And
Mm-hmm.
that's right when Dr. R steps in and says, "You're not a piece of shit." So intervention initially is reassurance. Something again you and I, Renee, spoke about in our prior episodes, is how many therapists come in and reassure and say, "You got this, no shame in your game," etc. And I've heard from patients that that's quite invalidating instead of validating. And
Mm-hmm.
then Dr. R goes on to say, "You had empathy once you got past your indignation." And he talks to Frank about how the more helpless you feel, the more shame crept in. And the more shame, the angrier you became. After listening to this patiently, at some point, Frank asked a question that I think was brilliant. And he says, "Does the knowledge of that, or is that supposed to help us?" So that's his question, which I think you can hear implicitly what he's saying there, right, Renee? Which is, yeah, that's sort of an intellectual understanding of what's going on, but I don't know if that necessarily makes me feel better. So let me actually just pause there, because I set the stage, but I want to leave a little room, Renee, if you want to jump in, because I know you're a little familiar with this as well. And if I missed anything or anything you wanted to add or any preliminary thoughts that you have on it.
Yeah, I think that you shared this story with me, earlier so that we could talk about it today, and I
Yes.
really appreciate that. I think that it is clear in this example that Frank's behavior or his thought processes spiraled. Okay, there's a spiral that happens with this shame
Mhm.
spiral. It can start with just a frustration. I should have used my time better. I should have been more, I could have done it this way. I could have done it that way. It's those should haves that can get in the way, okay, for a
Mhm.
lot of us.
Yes.
And then that starts to spiral. The frustration actually shifts into the anger or the self-talk, that
Yep.
very
Yep.
negative self-talk of what an idiot I am, what a piece of shit I am. And so that's not guilt. That's self-directed shame. Like when we
Yep.
reach that point of such a heavy negative self-talk, I think that's one of the ways we can tell we've kind of shifted over from guilt into shame. So no longer is it about, I didn't make the right choice. I could have, should have used my time better. It has now shifted to these emotions of worthlessness
Yeah.
or, the self-loathing that happens. So I think it's
Yep.
a great example.
Okay. But what about Dr. R, the famous Dr. R that I mentioned, right? well published, popular fellow. He labeled it, I don't know if you heard it, but as guilt. He said, "This is the guilt. You felt guilt." What about that piece? Did that strike? Because you're saying it's shame, and I'm saying, wait a minute, he's calling it guilt. And most people would, because you can argue based on our definition that there was a reparative effort, right? He
Mhm.
did say to her, he offered her a drink and said, "Don't worry about the eggs. Like, I'm not concerned about that." Isn't that guilt? I'm making believe I'm viewing or I'm listening to this, okay?
Mhm. So what yeah, so I do think there's a fine line, and I do think it's very easy to slide from guilt into shame, and I do think it's also possible to call it back, to pull yourself back.
Okay.
Okay. I think where yes, he did make some reparative efforts, and I'm really glad. I'm really glad to hear that. He called himself into check, which tells me he was able to stay present enough
Mm,
to be able to stop the spiral that shame can take us down. So when we're experiencing shame and now we're attacking ourselves, I think of it like you've got your immune system. When your immune system starts to attack you from within, that can get really threatening to you. Like that can be deadly even to your body.
yeah,
Same thing with shame. We start attacking ourselves from within. It can be detrimental to us
yeah,
because it sends us down, fight or flight mode. It sends us down where the thinking part of our brain gets knocked offline. All of these things can happen because of our own internal threat.
right,
And so
right.
I guess what I see in the story is he was able to have enough awareness to stop that spiral in
Okay,
that moment of clarity, whatever it was that caused that spiral, that shame loop to stop so that he didn't continue down that path. I think that's
okay,
what I hear.
okay, okay.